Are you ready to learn the 3 secrets to launching a successful podcast? Hi, I'm Bill, a recent client of the Podcast Mogul. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but aren't sure where to begin, he's got you covered. He is hosting a free webinar where he will share the 3 secrets that can help you launch, grow, and monetize your podcast without any fancy equipment or technical headaches. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot now and let him help get your podcast off the ground.
Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and today we have a truly exciting guest who is not only a successful investor and business owner, but also a true advocate for entrepreneurials looking to break free from the corporate grind. Our guest is an investor and business owner based out of High Point, North Carolina, and he's highly sought after for his expertise in digital strategy and operations. And he's frequently a conference speaker, podcast guest, and author. But what really sets our guest apart is his passion for professionalizing the Wild West of SMB acquisition, that's small to medium business acquisition. Over the years, he has helped dozens of entrepreneurs find, finance, and acquire small businesses, empowering them to escape corporate America and take control of their destinies. His journey is backed by a solid academic credentials, including an MBA from the prestigious Fouac School of Business at Duke University. His practical experience combined with his academic background allows him a unique perspective on challenges and opportunities in the small business acquisition space. In today's episode, he will share his insights on evolving landscapes of SMB acquisitions and how to navigate the process of finding and financing a small business and what it takes to transition from the corporate world to the successful business ownership. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or looking to scale your existing business, this conversation is going to be packed with actionable advice and inspiration. So please get ready to learn from one of the best in the business. And please join me in welcoming the insightful and accomplished Kevin Bibelhausen. I'm pretty sure I messed up the last name there, Kevin.
No, it's pretty good. It's Bibelhausen, but
Bibelhausen.
Honored so much worse. So you did a great job.
Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I'm truly, really interested because I haven't talked to anybody who acquires small businesses. So this is a very new world for me. Like I said in the intro, it's a Wild West. So I'm very excited to see what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And there's all kinds of different flavors of entrepreneurship, right? And this is the flavor that I found that I like the best. I think probably the majority of your audience would think that, based on, other guests you've had in the past, they got to start with a small side hustle and kind of grow that into something. And usually that's some, technology-based service or app, or maybe a, small service business like a cleaning business, things that are kind of popular around the, entrepreneur fringes where people are trying to kind of get away from their 9 to 5. And we do the way I did it, and the way that I tell people or help people do this is a much bigger swing. It's a much bigger bet. But it's funny that the title, the podcast, Invest in Yourself. I don't think that there's a more perfect description for what I did and what we do when we buy small businesses and investing in yourself. It really is taking a bet on you and your ability in the form of bank financing, personally guaranteed debt. So we can get into all of that, but then it's kind of tailor made, I think, for your audience.
I think so too. I'm excited because, like I said, I don't know anything about this, especially knowing that the older generation, the boomers, are starting to retire. There's a lot of small businesses that probably will be going out of business because there is no, continuation plan. And someone like yourself who's coming in helping not only keep the legacy of those businesses going, but also allow new people to come and take over that legacy and teaching them how to do it. So I'm very excited about this. But my first question is, how did you get into this world of entrepreneurship, but more specifically into buying small businesses and then making them bigger?
Yeah, I've always had an entrepreneurial itch, and I wasn't the guy that was like, in grade school or whatever that was selling candy bars or had some business out of their locker or anything like that. I wouldn't really consider myself like a natural born entrepreneur necessarily. I more just wanted to work for myself. And I got to the point in my corporate role where I had kind of I figured out what I was very good at, and I figured out, what I wanted to be doing. And it didn't really jive with what you're expected to do in a corporate role, where you're expected to be a cog in the machine. You're not, depending on your role, you're not really asked to be creative. You're not really asked to do anything kind of outside the box, that they put you in. And that wasn't attractive for me at the end. So I've always kind of had this idea, right, of working for myself. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if it meant, starting a company. I didn't know if I had no idea. But I read this book called The Harvard Business Review Guide to Buying Small Businesses. It's published by HBR. You could go, it's published in 2017. I read it in 2018, and I fell in love with the idea of buying a small business through this book. And specifically one story in it where a guy would go and he bought a porta potty business. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. Like so many of us, and myself included, when we think about entrepreneurship, especially if you're kind of our age and you grew up with, sort of these unicorn tech startups, and, it was the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Instagrams and the, all of these, huge companies that grew out of all the VC funding. That's kind of what you think entrepreneurship is. Mm-hmm. And really it's more of, that's an edge case. That's not normal. Entrepreneurship is, basically solving a problem that you find. It could be very local, or it could be some, this has got to scale to 1 billion users. But I had that idea in my mind that's what it meant to be an entrepreneur, is that you got to be a tech founder. And once I read this book, I realized that I can be an entrepreneur if I, go start or buy a porta potty business. Or, growing up in a neighborhood of middle-class people, like I grew up next to doctors and lawyers and all that kind of stuff, but I also grew up next to people who owned an asphalt company and owned a construction company. And I didn't know that those businesses could be sold or anything. I thought there was 2 ways to basically have a business. You either started it or you inherited it. I didn't understand that they could trade. Like, I didn't understand that guy could list that business for sale and not give it to his children or whatever. Looking back, that's kind of a naive, belief or perspective, but you just don't know what you don't know. And once I figured out that those businesses could be bought and sold, I was much more attracted to the idea of coming into a business that was sort of already gone through the 0 to 1, like the product market fit phase, and then looking for something to scale. And looking for something that has, repeatable, enduringly profitable track record that you could then, come in with in this case, corporate experience, and be able to scale it to the next level. Take it now from, instead of 0 to 1, you're going from 1 to 10. And that's kind of how I view, what I do and what people who kind of come into these situations who want to go buy a small business, they're taking on financing, they're taking on personally guaranteed debt a lot of the times to do it. And so you want something that's consistently profitable. In fact, that's more important than the growth possibility, because at the end of the day, if you pay back the debt, like, you have a very profitable business, even if it doesn't grow at all. If it grows the GDP, right? If it grows 3% a year, who cares? Yeah. Now, all of us want more growth than that, but if that's it's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is obviously the business fails, but if that's sort of like your base case, that's not so bad.
Yeah, you have money coming in,
right,
and paying off the debt, and now you have a cash flow business that you now can look about investing and growing it, or getting a secondary business and going on like that. So after you read the Harvard Business Review on purchasing small businesses or learning about small businesses, what was the first business that you looked at acquiring in your journey?
Yeah. Not a porta potty business. I went completely different. It's funny when you read something and then you're like, well, that's a really great idea. And then when you go to apply it, you apply it in the completely wrong way. I think that's just, being younger and dumber. But I went and I tried to go buy an e-commerce business. And it was a small e-commerce business, a reseller. It wasn't like an FBA business, but it did have some Amazon, exposure and all of that. And long story short is like I had this business under contract. I was super excited because it was, my first deal.
Mhm.
And it fell apart at the end because I was looking for financing, and we got to underwriting. And at a certain point, the lender came back to me and said, actually, I know we told you need X for your equity amount. You're actually going to need 2X. And I was like, well, that's all the money I have. So I can't get you any more. And I didn't know I didn't know you could raise capital for these deals. I didn't know there'd be any interest. I knocked on a couple doors, but it was very just kind of haphazard because I didn't know how to go through the capital raise process.
Mhm.
So I had to let the deal die because I just didn't have the finances to get across the finish line. And so I went back to my corporate job and kind of was like, well, all right, maybe this isn't going to work out for me. And I kind of just bided my time for another 3 to 4 years until the pandemic. And I was working at a hospital at the time in digital strategy and operations. So working with all kinds of digital transformation efforts and all of that within the hospital. And during COVID, which those two things together, technology focus within a hospital during one of the most crushing periods on the healthcare system is enough to burn anybody out. And that's kind of what happened as I went through it. And I was like, this just isn't what I want to be doing. Like I like the people, I like the work, I like the mission, but it doesn't really fulfill me. I still want to be doing something for me. I want to be building my career. I want to be building equity in my career and my business and myself, however you want to think about it. And not just working, necessarily for a salary, but to really have something that I owned and would gain value over time. So I quit my job in 2021 and 22 and kicked off another search that I ended up acquiring in about a year. So January 2022 kicked off my most recent search, and then acquired in January 23 a distribution business, a textile distribution business here in North Carolina.
Whew. And from there, you just skyrocketed into helping others. And
Well, that part for sure. Yeah, I thought you were going to say like the business skyrocketed in growth. I was like, that's decidedly not true. Well, I'm much more on the side of the let's grow with GDP and pay the debt back, right? Like I have aspirations of large growth too, but like effectively you're bootstrapping a larger company. Like you come in, you use the debt to acquire a business. It's like a platform company, right? Like here's my point of entry. And then if I want to grow anything on top of that, if I want to be a larger company, you're effectively bootstrapping those operations and getting to that point where instead of going out and getting like venture capital, money or anything like that, you're funding with internal cash flow, the growth. But yeah, no, I started helping people pretty much right away. I firmly believe in kind of dropping the ladder behind you, so other people can find their way out. I've talked to, I've been a speaker at a number of different, SMB acquisition boot camps and conferences. And I do a lot of these podcasts just to talk about it because it's a underutilized, form of entrepreneurship, or relatively unknown. It's becoming quite popular. At this point, most of the major business schools teach it. And there's a number of people coming out of MBA programs who, typically decide to do what's called like a search fund or a self-funded search. Those are two different things, but effectively they mean going out and buying a business, just different versions of that. So it's becoming more and more popular as you alluded to the number of baby boomers retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. There's all sorts of stats and things that people throw around. It's like, oh, that's $1 trillion of wealth that's got to be transferred and this and that. The reality is that a lot of these businesses won't transfer. They're 1 or 2 person shops, and there is not really a lot of value there. It's effectively a job, or it's effectively like a really, really, really good side hustle. There's nothing wrong with that. It just doesn't necessarily have the ability to trade hands.
Yeah.
So a lot of those stats are overblown, but that doesn't mean there's not opportunity. There's absolutely opportunity. I mean, just sitting where I sit now as an investor, we see tons of deal flow and opportunities daily of people getting these kinds of businesses of, call it 500 to $2 million in EBITDA under contract for reasonable multiples, 3 to 5 times. And they're either going to go be the full-time manager or they've got professional management that they're bringing in. There's all kinds of permutations and flavors of how to do this. So you can you can do this however you want, really. You just have to be comfortable with a certain amount of risk. Every flavor has a different risk profile.
Yeah, I think that is the key as an entrepreneur. You have to be used to the risk, but also love that unknown, because buying a small business is like you're starting at step 2 instead of step 1, where you're trying to figure out what the business is. The business is already there. Your job now is to either keep it going and make sure the money grows slowly, like you said, the GDP of at least 3%, or take it to the next level, grow it to a big size, and then sell it so that you could get that 10x or that X equivalent when you do sell it. How do people find you? Like, I'm super interested. Do you get everyday people coming to talk to you about purchasing, or are you really seeing more business graduates, like business school graduates, coming into this space?
By virtue of the fact that I have an MBA and went through business school, I do get, quite a few MBA graduates or referrals from people business school classmates, like, hey, I know my buddy is thinking about doing this. I know, you have also gone down this road. Would you be interested in having a conversation? Yeah, sure. I get a lot of those. I get, a lot of, I've got several messages on my phone right now from MBA classmates that are interested in doing this, and they're at different stages. I've got a guy who's a former, he's a retiring Marine. He's got another, 9 months or something left, and he's looking for what he's going to do after. And it's funny because they go through this sort of, I think military guys specifically, if they go through like a business school program, they go through an MBA program, it's like they kind of come in and they're like, all right, so my exit opportunities are consulting, investment banking, and that's pretty much like those are the two. Like, if I get one of these, I'm doing well, right? Yeah. And it's funny because this particular guy came to me and he was like, I'm going to do investment banking. I think that's the right way to go. And they'll have these different programs, this, that, and third. I'm like, okay. He comes back, the next month I see him or whatever. It's like, I think I'm going to do consulting. McKinsey's got this onboarding program. And I was like, dude, have you ever met a McKinsey consultant? Like, do you know what they do? Because I swear, like, you're going to hate your life because you're coming out of like, you're not used to the kind of corporate bureaucracy. Like, the military is one thing, but the kind of thing that you do, and you're just making decks all day, and it's just like work for work's sake, and you're not really impacting a business. You're just kind of, all my McKinsey consultant friends can get mad at me or whatever, but like, it's fine. Like, look, like, everybody knows the deal. Like, it just kind of is what it is. But like, you have to be a certain kind of individual. You have to have a high kind of tolerance for pain and BS. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but
yeah, you're good. You're good.
You have to have a high tolerance for bullshit if you're going into and kissing ass and doing all that kind of stuff to actually make it a career. And I know people who are awesome at that, and that's great. If you can make an awesome living doing that. I can't do it. I'm not that. I don't have that kind of filter. And neither does my friend that I'm talking about. So it's like I had this conversation with him, like, I don't think you understand like what these guys do and how it is in that kind of a culture. So that's a really long tangent to answer your question of like who comes up to you, but it's everybody, man. Like I'm pretty active online on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I get people messaging me all the time from different walks of life that, I don't have people tend to. The reason people find me is because they or are interested in talking to me is because I'm not from a finance background. So a lot of the people that do this have been investment bankers, have been private equity analysts. So like this is kind of normal for them. Like they know how to source a deal and finance a deal and put a team together, and they know how to do all the like back office work. But then when it comes to operating the business, they've never actually managed anybody before. They've never actually led a team. They've been spreadsheet jockeys. They've been, so like all this search stuff is really easy for them. Like they get it. They've got the tools, they've got the process, they get the whole thing down. But when it comes to actually the shit that matters,
The day-to-day stuff, the real business stuff.
yeah, the stuff that matters, right? The stuff that actually drives the P&L. So people find me because I came out of operations and I don't have a conventional background. Like I didn't, I started in, my bachelor's degrees in music. Like I don't have a business background. I don't have a finance background. Everything I learned, on the job in corporate operations. And then I went and got my MBA. So I don't have any sort of, I'm not like in some ivory tower, being finance bro, how to buy a business and all of that, and not worrying about the operations. Like operations is a huge deal to me. And it's funny because people will talk about, well, what's the hardest part about, buying a business and being a search fund entrepreneur or acquisition entrepreneur or whatever. And most people say the search is the easy part and the operations is the hard part. And there's some truth to that, mostly for the finance people, right? Who've never been in operations. Not to say that operations is easy, it's not. But if you've been doing operations for a decade plus in your career and you get into it, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is all the same, right? The people are people, the blocking and tackling is the same. None of this is like surprising to me, right? I've seen most of this stuff before in one way or another, but the whole search process is difficult because it's new. How do I find a business for sale? How do I know if it's a good business? What do I do next? If I find a business that I think is a good business, how do I get access to the materials? How do I finance it? How do I make an offer? How do I, all these different things like I didn't know how to do. And so it's for people like me, like that process is harder to figure out because it's just brand new. Now the good news is like, you really only have to do it once, right? Like you don't have to do it again. Operations, you pretty much have to do every day, but most people coming into this, they once they figure out the search process, they're like, okay, well, this isn't rocket science. Like, I get it now. They're going to do more than one deal. Nobody wants to just do one deal when they come in to do this. They want to buy their first thing, and then they have aspirations of, being Warren Buffett and building a holding company. Most people come in with super high, lofty goals, and that's fine. Yeah. But yeah, there's different kinds of people that are interested in doing this. There's space for all of them, and different businesses attract different folks.
Yeah, it's true. I love that one half knows how to do one part and the other half kind of figures out how to do the other part. And you're like, I can help you with both. You're like bringing two together in your expertise. When let's say someone is interested in buying a small business, let's say a mom and pop, dry cleaners we'll go with.
Sure.
What are the first things that they should be looking at? Like they know the business has already been sold. Let's say their friend's dad says, yeah, we're looking at retiring, probably selling the business. And they're like, I'm interested in buying. What would you suggest that their first steps are before they go sign the dotted line and take on the massive amount of debt that is to purchase a business?
Yeah. There's a lot that needs to happen before you're comfortable signing on the dotted line. Because no matter the amount of money, really, it doesn't really matter the size of the deal. Like you're probably pretty concentrated. I mean, like your net worth is going to be pretty concentrated in whatever you end up buying or doing. Right? Because most of us coming to this, if like you're listening to this podcast, you probably don't have a big pile of money you're sitting on.
No, we're not Warren Buffett sitting. Yeah, we're not Scrooge McDuck.
Right. So anything that you do is like, it's meaningful, it doesn't, the numbers are the numbers, but they're all really big numbers. So first of all, if you're brand new, sometimes you get those deals that land in your lap where it's like a family friend, hey, I'm thinking about retiring and you want to go, that's called like a proprietary or off market deal. Those are hard, especially for first time people who have never been through any sort of process. So if it's me and if I'm a first time buyer, I would probably go enlist the help of an M&A advisor that could probably help me through that. And they're basically just a coach and a mediator. Like they make sure that, the two parties are talking and that you're basically hitting the milestones and doing everything. It doesn't sound hard, but
It sounds like
Yeah, it just,
been in the world. Yeah, it's more difficult than you're making it sound.
yeah, and especially because when you compare it to, the alternative, which is finding businesses that are on market. So this would be the equivalent of, hey, this business or this house is listed on the MLS versus for sale by owner, right? Um, it's not a perfect comparison, but it'll do. And so if you go find something that's listed, like, big aggregator, biz buy sell, if you've ever had any inkling of buying a business, or you've Googled any of those words, biz buy sell will come up as like the number one hit. Most people start with biz buy sell. It's just an aggregator of on market deals. So go there and look around, check out, see what's available. Most of the deals aren't worth your time, and that's putting it mildly. Like, there's a lot of garbage on there, but you'll still learn something. And what those deals have the benefit of having an intermediary, a broker involved, and the broker has already gotten them to a certain point where they're ready to sell their business. It's almost like they've gone through this, like they've gone through a ceremony, they've gone through the cleaning up of the financials, they've gone through some effort to get here. And so they're not 100% of the time, but most of the time, they're very committed to selling their business. They know they need to, or they're ready to. Off market can be hot and cold, right? And so, like, because they don't have any skin in the game for selling, like usually somebody's paid a broker already, or they've at least gone through the motions and the efforts. So they're sort of bought into the process. If it's off market, like I can stop returning your calls tomorrow and I'm not out anything. So that's why I would stay with the safety of brokerage search. It's also going to be a hell of a lot faster because the broker has gotten to them to that certain point. And you have somebody who theoretically should be driving the process, and the broker, or helping drive the process, and the broker. So you would go, I'm going to try and stay super high level, right? So you would go to the broker. Let's assume that they give you access to the materials. You sign the NDA. That's a whole other conversation about whether or not they take you seriously. But let's assume that you can clear that hurdle. You get access to the information, and then assume that you have all the documents that you need to make a decision, which is also like, do you get tax returns up front? Do you not get tax returns up front? How clean are the financials? Do they even make any sense? Is there any sort of, review or audit involved? Probably not. So like you're making a guess here, right?
Yeah.
And you have to be comfortable with that, with putting in an offer, which is a letter of intent. Letter of intents are non-binding. So people get afraid to make an offer. You should be afraid to make an offer. Once you get it under contracts, under LOI, then you go into doing more diligence. And that would be like, okay, I'm going to hire an accounting firm to come in and do a quality of earnings study, which is basically just rebuilding their P&L off of bank statements and credit card statements, and basically making sure the business actually makes the cash they say it does. And so then you compare it with, what the broker said and what the quality of earnings say. And usually there's some discrepancy, and you go back and forth and negotiate that. And then you get legal involved as all of that is, being tidied up. And then legal, you would have a purchase agreement drafted. I don't recommend you draft your own purchase agreement. I've seen it done, ChatGPT's a thing. Wouldn't recommend it. I'm not a lawyer, but I still would prefer to pay the lawyers rather than rely on AI generated purchase agreements or form template purchase agreements. And then you would be talking with your bank this whole time, right? So your bank is sort of like your first partner that you go to if you're getting debt. Not every transaction has debt involved. Most do. And so that lender would kind of be at your hip through this whole process, making sure that they need to make sure the financials are clean. They're going to want to see the quality of earnings. They're going to want to see, what's going on with the legal docs, because, it's an expensive transaction for them too. So that's kind of like the core, process is you would talk to a lender, you'd have some sort of advisor, sometimes depending on your skill set or you're comfortable working kind of in this space. So somebody like me, or somebody that's an M&A advisor that can kind of coach you through this process. And then, you make your offer on a business that you find interesting, and then you do your due diligence. And, your accounting piece is going to cost you probably somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000. to do a real quality of earnings study. So it ain't cheap. And your legal is also not cheap. Hard for me to quote legal prices.
Legal is just, it's a black hole. It's a black hole of price.
Here's what I'll say about all of that is like those expenses can be rolled into your loan if you want to do that. So like it doesn't hurt your pocketbook immediately, but it isn't cheap. Good service rarely is, but you do get what you pay for. And I've seen plenty of people who've bought businesses that have owners competing with them after the sale. I've seen plenty of, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong. I'm not here to tell you that this is like the golden ticket and it's the easiest thing you'll ever do. Like shit happens, and people are people, and you're going to have good ones and you're going to have not so good ones. And so it really matters who you buy from. You don't just want to have, this isn't like buying a house where like the buyer and seller usually don't meet. And it's very much sort of like this blinded transaction. That's not this at all. Like when you're buying a Main Street business, the person you're buying from really matters because, you're effectively inheriting their reputation. You're inheriting their problems in the business because there are, despite what they'll tell you, there's going to be problems in the business. And then you have to deal with them post-close. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it can be, it can be depending on what kind of person they are and if they're going to try and compete with you and if they're going to try and undermine you and if they're going to be all up in your business. And those are risks that people have to consider.
It's a crazy world. I'm like, this is something that's really interesting to me. And it's both, like you said, you're taking on their reputation, their history. It's also the person's baby. They grew this. And so if they're not like, if they're scared to let it go because it's like, it's not under my guiding hand anymore. This person doesn't know the ins and outs, what we went through to build it.
I'm talking with a guy right now I'm trying to buy another company, and I know with an owner right now who I had to strike something from the LOI after reviewing with the broker who I've got a good relationship with now. And he was like, you might want to strike this sentence. And the sentence was, after an appropriate amount of time, which, is like 2 years or something, I can't remember exactly what was in the offer, we'll look to identify your replacement. And he was like, I don't think that's going to go over well because this guy thinks that nobody can do the job. They need to have 5 years of experience to do the job. And like, nobody can replace and nobody can do the job that he does. And like, okay, so it's one of those guys that's like, it's like a hero complex or a messiah complex or whatever you want to call it. That like, nobody understands this thing as intimately as me and nobody can do what I can do. And we know that's just not true, right? Like if you look in a corporate environment or anything, like people are replaceable. I'm replaceable.
We're cogs in the wheel.
That special. Yeah. At a certain point, we're all kind of replaceable.
When you decided to get into this world and buy your first small business, what steps did you do to invest in yourself to get ready for that? Like, because it's like taking on a big risk that this is. It's like you're taking a big swing. You're pulling a Babe Ruth, if you will. You're trying to make sure that when you hit, you connect with that ball and it's going out. Because you want the deal obviously to be nearly perfect. What are the things that you did to invest in yourself to make sure that you were sure that you were ready for this?
Yeah, it's expensive to come up with nothing after you do. I did that, right? I told the story about the first acquisition I had. What I didn't say was that I spent a lot of money on that deal up front when I shouldn't have. And so I lost mid 5 figures probably on that deal because I was spending money too early in the process and I didn't know any better. The second time around, I was obviously much more educated because I had gone through it the first time. But I also, I found people who hadn't successfully done this before and was introduced to a group of people in Tampa. The guy who's running the program's name is Sam Rosati. He's in Tampa. He runs SM Boot Camp. You can Google it. I'm happy to maybe give you guys the link and put in the show notes or something if people are interested. It's essentially a boot camp to learn how to do this and to learn about the search process. And so it's great for people who have operations experience who don't know the search process, but they can go and they can find out and they can kind of see the playbook and then have a network of people who are going through it at the same time, and also have introductions and network connections made to people that would be considered part of your deal team. So lenders, brokers, insurance providers, accountants, etc. The people that you would need to actually get your deal across the finish line. So there's a number of different programs like that out there. SM Bootcamp is the one I like, and the one I personally went through, and I've also spoken. I've been a return sort of like alumni, going back there. Actually, I'm going in September. I'll be there next month. There's also Acquisition Lab, run by Walker Deibel. So the other kind of like book that's become popular in this space is Buy Then Build. That's a great book too. I was in this before. I tried to buy a business from Walker a number of years ago before he even wrote his book, but now he's like, acquisition entrepreneur celebrity. So he's got his own program that he runs, and they do a great job. I've invested in several of their entrepreneurs. They do a great job too.
I love that. And so in your role right now, are you more of someone that loves helping people find their deals and grow their own businesses, or are you still looking to purchase more and more business? I know you mentioned that you're looking to purchase another business from a potential business owner. Where do you see yourself in your role now? Do you see yourself more as the acquisitioner, or do you see yourself as more helping people acquire their business?
Yeah. So I've been asked that question a number of different times, because I also run, I'm a partner in a fund that invests in these businesses. So I'm both an owner operator of a business that I purchased with, personally guaranteed money and all of that. So like I'm in the trenches. Like this is the office of the business that I purchased. Right. So I'm here every day. So I would say that's probably 70% of my time. And then the other 30% is working, through the fund to, discover people who are interested in doing this, talk to people who have deals on the line, make investment decisions, raise capital for the fund, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm still heavily into this as an owner operator. I don't know that I could ever be on the other side of that. I'm not sure I ever want to be a 70%, investor only, but because I like what I do. I like being in operations. But that being said, like I take tons of calls from people or field emails from people who are interested in this space. I don't have as much time as I used to be able to do it. So I do, I have like a set blocks of time that I put out there, but, I'm generally pretty open to any conversation for people who are interested or in different parts of this journey, whether you're just starting out or whether you've got a deal on the line.
I love that. I love that. I want to know, where do you see yourself in like 10 years? Because this is still kind of like the Wild West. It's a brand new, and we know like in 5 years, we're going to have that increase of sales going. But where do you see yourself in that 10 years after the kind of boom happens?
Yeah, I mean, as an investor, we hit this pretty early. I think we weren't the first fund, in this space, but we're one of the first, and we write fairly large checks into these deals. So our buy box, would basically be businesses that are doing, north of $1 million in EBITDA. So it's fairly up market, fairly large businesses. Business to business only. Like we've got, and our second fund that we're launching now is going to be a $20 million fund. So we're investing quite a bit of money into these deals. It's a great time to, as a potential searcher or as a potential investor, if you want to invest passively, to be involved in a fund like this. We did our first one, and then we're about to do our second one. Actually, we just launched it last week. So that's live right now and going, and we have our first couple deals kind of in the pipeline to invest in. But in 10 years, I hope to still be doing something, on the investment side and growing my own, personal holdings through there, investing through the fund continually, because it is just a more diversified offering than investing directly in companies. I personally plan to acquire, other businesses and kind of roll them up into, what I've purchased. I'm looking at doing sort of like a luxury goods holding company. So like my textile business can be one of the brands, under that umbrella, but bringing in sort of, other consumer luxury goods, hospitality, different kinds of companies that are sort of adjacent and sort of that lifestyle grouping.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my goal. And then have a shared services model. It's really like a holdco, right? Like to have sort of like okay, so we share all finance and accounting, we share HR, we share among the brands, right? And the brands have their own leaders, but then we have these, the larger, shared services corporate. That's what I'm building right now. And actively working to launch that holdco as we speak, but that should be probably first of the year. But that's kind of the 10-year plan is a lot of like, keep doing what I'm doing. This is the first time in my career where I've been able to say like, this is what I want to be doing in 30 years. And I've never really had that feeling before. And any job, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can relate. Like I've been a job hopper. I'm a 2 to 3 year guy because I would come into a job, 6 months would be okay. And then I'd start to get bored. And then I'd be bored for about a year. And then I'd be like, all right, I got to do something else. And then I'd look for another job and I'd leave, and this is the first time I don't feel like I have to do it.
That's an amazing feeling, and I'm very jealous of you.
Yeah.
He's finding something that you're super passionate about, and you can see a future kind of. I see you doing the Louis Vuitton type thing where he has like the liquor, he has the hotels, it has all the nice high end stuff, and I think that's a great way of doing it because it's possible. We've seen it done, so replicating it is not too hard, and it's going to be interesting. And I would love to have you on when you're the next level, so that we can hear how you. Yeah, that's going to be a fun interview. We are coming close to the end of the interview, which I hate because I'm learning so much about this new world that I'm possibly going to be going into maybe in 5 years when I can jump in, or even sooner. But I would love to know, if I have your 10-year-old self right beside me, Kevin, what is one piece of advice you would love to be able to pass back to your younger self to help you in your journey?
You can't predetermine or plan your life. I've always been that guy. I always had a plan for my life. And, by this age, I'm going to do this. By this age, I'm going to do this. By this age, I'm going to do that. And none of it worked out, right? None of it went that way. And so for a long time, I kind of beat myself up about it, and that I wasn't meeting the goals that I had, goals or aspirations or whatever that I had for my life. And it turns out like it just went in a different direction, right? And that's okay, because you change. I'm not the same person as I was at 10 or 13 or whatever when I was coming up with these ideas of what I wanted to do. Is like at that age, I wanted to be a musician. And I had all these different things like, well, I was gonna do this and that, and none of that happened. I went a different direction, and that's okay. And I think just being comfortable with that is actually a huge unlock in your life, and that you just kind of have to enjoy the journey. And I know that that's hard to hear, because a lot of us, especially if you're sort of on the outside looking in to, let's just use our case, entrepreneurship. If you're sort of in that entrepreneur phase and you're like, man, my life will be so much better once I get across that line, you might be right, but like it will happen for you if that is something that you're passionate about and that you just need to do, right? Like you can't turn that part of yourself off. If you're bound and determined to work for yourself and to build something on your own, you eventually will hit a breaking point where like, I can't do anything else. I have to go do this. And it's okay to listen to that voice and go do it.
I love it. All right, Kevin, I'm going to jump off stage here. I want you to let my audience know where they can connect with you if they are interested in, being a part of the fund or start their journey purchasing their first business. The floor is yours, sir.
I'm pretty easy to find. My last name is pretty unique, so if it's not me, they're related to me. But I do own my last name domain, so you can find me at Bibelhausen.com. I'm an active poster on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I've got a newsletter that I also publish every other week. Just nothing heavy, more like think pieces and things I'm going through and thinking about as I operate the business and grow my companies. Like Phil said, I'm a partner in a fund that invests in these kind of businesses. So I'm always happy to talk to people who are interested in buying and interested in passive investing in these businesses. happy to hear from any of you. And best place to get a hold of me is on my website.
Excellent. Kevin, I want to thank you so much for being here, sharing your advice. I'm very excited to have you back on down the road to see where your journey is and how you're crushing it and creating your little mini empire of luxury goods. If
One can only hope. Yeah.
I can see it. I can see it in you. You're determined to have it, and you probably will have it. So it's going to be a fun conversation to revisit next time you're on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below. We'll have all the links to connect with Kevin, and all the other business advice that he provided will be down there. I thank you so much for listening, and remember to always invest in yourself.
Thanks for tuning in. Now it's time to take the next step. When you're ready to dive deeper into how to launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, Phil's got something special for you. Join him for a free webinar where he'll reveal the 3 secrets that have helped countless entrepreneurs succeed in podcasting. Click the link in the show notes to save your spot, and let's turn your podcasting dreams into reality.